Take your Bibles and turn to Galatians chapter 5 again tonight. Galatians chapter 5. We've been been in this chapter for a couple of weeks now, but we were looking at the works of the flesh, and then we're going to finish that up, and then we get to the fruit of the Spirit. And we were talking about the fact last time that those are two mutually exclusive things. You can't have the works of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. They're two different things. And we were in verse number 19 and following there. Paul says, now the works of the flesh are manifest. Again, that word manifest, it means obvious, open, apparent. That's clear to see. He's saying there's no question what these are. And what does he say? The works of the flesh are manifest, which are these. And then he begins going through those. And we got through several of them. He talked about adultery, fornication, uncleanness, and lasciviousness. And all of those kind of center around the same idea of immorality. But specifically, the last one, lasciviousness, basically just kind of sums all of that up. And that's exactly what we see in our culture and society today. People don't care that you know about their sin, and they're just parading it and putting it right out in your face. And that's literally what lasciviousness means. And he's saying that these are works of the flesh. Now remember, what's important here in this chapter specifically is he's talking about the works that goes along with the law, goes along with flesh, all of that, as opposed to the Spirit and walking in the Spirit. And they're two different things. And remember specifically, we said that the walking in the flesh and trying to live by the law or the works of the flesh can manifest themselves in different ways. We think of it as trying to keep the law. So the law says do this or don't do that, and somebody says, well, I'm going to do my best to keep all of the law, and by that then I'll please God and I'll go to heaven, or I'll be, get ahead with God, or whatever it is. And we say, no, you can't do that. The law is not there to give you a way to get to God or a way to please God. It's there to show you that you can't please God on your own. The only one who could was Jesus Christ. He's the only one who actually kept the law. He's the only one with no sin. And then he died to pay for our sin on the cross. So we think of the law that way, but at the same time, the works of the flesh are not just trying to keep the law, but it can be the other side as well, completely rejecting law and following lawlessness. And that is also a work of the flesh as well. Neither one of those will get you any closer to God. And we'll talk more about that here in a moment, but we need to keep those two things in mind. And then we got to verse 20 and talked about idolatry. And we said how that is an especially wicked work of the flesh, because in idolatry we are trying to take something and make it take the place of God. Of course, back in this day, it may have been an actual golden statue or a wooden thing or whatever. And of course, there are places in the world today that still do that. There's places that do that are much more polished. You can go into some Catholic churches and places and see some icons there and some statues and things. And they would say, oh, we're not worshiping idols, but they'll tell you they're praying to the saints that these represent and things like that. And it's all the same thing. But even without that, anything that we put in God's place is idol worship. And the biggest idol that we worship is ourself. When we decide that, hey, I'll decide what's best for me. I'll decide what's right and what's wrong. Then you've put yourself in God's place. And any of that is wickedness. It's all works of the flesh. So he says idolatry, and then he goes to witchcraft. And we talked about the fact that oftentimes in this idol worship, there is witchcraft involved in it as well. There's people that have seen supernatural things that are not godly, they're not right, and it's demonic. And he says that comes of the works of the flesh as well. And then he talked about hatred, and I think this is basically where we left off last time, the last one we talked about. And of course, man's hatred for man has been the common case since Cain killed Abel. People have hated one another. It's been the cause of wars and strife ever since. And of course, today we see it on a scale that seems to be unprecedented. Hatred everywhere. And it's amazing because most of the time, those who actually hate other people accuse them of hating people. There's folks that would look at us and say, oh, you just hate people. And the reason they'd say that is because we stand up and say, hey, these things are wrong. This is sin. This is not right. And they say, well, you just hate people. No, we don't hate anybody. We love folks. Matter of fact, we love folks enough to tell them the truth. If somebody's driving down the road and there's a big storm going and the bridge is washed out, and we see that, and we're to stop our car and turn around and wave down somebody and say, hey, stop, don't go this way. You're in danger. You're going to get killed if you go this way. We don't hate those people. We love them. We love them enough to try and stop them and tell them the truth. And if they were to say, man, get out of my way, I don't have time to listen to this. Who are you to tell me where I can drive and where I can't drive? They could drive right past us and go off and into the river and die, but we did our best to try and stop them. And they would look and say, oh, you hate us. No, we don't hate you at all. But on the other side, folks look at us, people that are living in sin and wickedness, and they hate anyone who points that out. And it's because they know that they're wrong. And their conscience, they're not saved, so their conscience is hurting them. Now, they can eventually put that conscience down more and more until finally they don't hear that anymore, but they don't want to be told what's right or wrong. And so hatred is something that's been around from the very beginning. And it continues on with the ones that follow after that. He talks about variance. Variance has to do with strife and quarrelsomeness. It's all about causing division. If truth causes division, then so be it. We have to be careful about this because we have to understand that truth is truth. It can't be compromised. And if it causes division, then we have to accept that. But we don't want to purposely cause division in a church or in a family or whatever. We're trying to do our best to live together. Paul said in Romans 12, verse 18, if it be possible, as much as lieth within you or lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. That's what we ought to do. But there's a lot of people that are trying to cause divisions. And of course we see that in our world today. We see people trying to divide people. We see that in politics. We talked about this the other day, but one of the best strategies that people use all the time is divide and conquer. Tell people, hey, you're in this group and they're in that group, and they don't like you and you don't like them. And I'm on your side, so you vote for me. And in reality, if we were to get together with the other person, we might find out, hey, I don't hate them. We might disagree on something here or there, but we can get along with one another. But they don't want you getting along. They want you divided so that they can control you one way or another. That's what variance is, someone that's causing division. Now, we can't compromise on things that are right. But, there's a lot of things that in the grand scheme of things are not that important. It's not a scriptural thing. It's not that important. But, boy, folks will certainly use it to divide. And that happens in churches as well. There's some people that just can't stand for everything to be going good. They can't stand for there to be unity. They've got to find something somewhere to pick at and try and cause problems. Well, that's a work of the flesh. That is someone who has decided, hey, I need to insert myself in here and do something and cause some issue. That happens in families as well. We're all familiar with a family member that's always causing trouble. Everything was fine and they had to cause problems here. So he's talking about these things as works of the flesh. He talks about variance, and then he talks about emulation. Now, emulation has to do with jealousy. When we're in the flesh and we see someone else get something that we don't have, or get the recognition we think we deserve, or whatever, it causes us to puff up in pride and bitterness. When we walk in the Spirit, we're not jealous of another person for a blessing they've gotten. Hey, one way you can tell that you're growing, you're becoming more spiritually mature, is when somebody else is blessed and you're happy for them. You're excited for them. You don't think, well, why'd they get that? Well, they don't deserve. Why didn't I get something? When you get where you say, man, that's great. I'm glad they got that. I'm glad the Lord blessed them in that. That's a sign of spiritual maturity. That's a sign of walking in the Spirit. But when we're upset all the time, well, they got that. Why didn't I get that? Then that's a sign we're walking in the flesh. And he said that's a work of the flesh called emulation. Then the next one he talks about here in verse number 20 is wrath. Wrath refers to a burst of anger. As when we're jealous of someone else, we believe that we haven't been treated the way we deserve and we lash out. You know, the flesh tells us that we deserve, this is what your flesh will tell you, you deserve only good things. You don't ever deserve anything bad happening to you. And you certainly deserve at least